Tonight we have two very special guests from the Florida Museum of Natural History with me. So first we have Lazaro Vinola. He did his undergrad at Montana
Lazaro.
State University, and
KSU.
and he will be talking about the vertebrates and some of the invertebrates of the Cretaceous of Cuba. And he's currently John Block's student in vertebrate paleontology at the museum. And we also have Julian Correa, and he is in the Manchester lab with me in paleobotany. And he did his undergrad and master's at, was it UT Austin? Do I have the?
In that UT, I'm Texas A&M.
Oh, Texas A&M. Oh, okay. Sorry, I always get the two confused. I know the rivalry too. Texas A&M, he worked on progymnosperms in the Carboniferous while he was there, and he's currently working on sort of the evolution of Betulaceae, particularly with hornbeam, the divergence of hornbeam and hazelnuts. But he's also working on some of the plants from Cuba as well. So I'll turn the talk over to them.
Thank you.
I don't know who's going first. You guys should have the ability to share if you want to have a presentation. If not, I can make you the host. I just need to know who gets host.
You can make me host. I'll show it, and Lazaro will actually start the talk. But yes, it does look like we'll need some permissions.
Okay. So Julian, I'm making you the host right now.
Okay.
Just make sure when you guys are done, they hand it back to me.
Yes.
And then the rest of you guys, if you make sure you have yours muted so we're uninterrupted with their presentation. Thank you.
Okay, Lazaro, hopefully it's up. Does everyone see it?
All right. Well, thanks everyone for inviting us to talk today about some of the fossils that we'll be working from Cuba. We're very excited to be here and to be sharing some of our recent finding. And yeah, I was talking earlier with Julian today that with COVID and everything that has happened this year, I feel that I haven't been like too much out sharing with people outside of like the scientific community. It's like what we're doing, and yeah, it's really nice. Thank you again. Yeah, we're gonna talk tonight about some fossils that have been recently found from the late Cretaceous in central Cuba. The project is not only research that Julian and I are doing, it's also part of a larger team of researchers from Cuba, Mexico, Argentina, and us here that are collaborating in different fronts, describing the invertebrates, the plants, the vertebrates, the marine fauna, everything that we're finding in these deposits. I hope that after the presentation tonight, you're going to be as excited as we are about these findings. And of course, it's like everyone knows a little bit about Cuba because of the old cars, the beaches, the cigars, the rum, but not necessarily because of the fossils. And for the people who study the natural history of the island, maybe they're interested in the fauna that is still living there. It's like we have like numerous endemic birds, high diversity of lizards, amphibians, small rodents. But it's not only that. Also, the fossil record in Cuba is extremely interesting. The fauna from the Quaternary was highly diverse. We, for example, have like the largest owl in the world. There was a flightless terrestrial owl named Onymealonyx. We have high diversity of rodents. We have ground sloth or boreal sloths, primate tortoises, giant eagles. And all of that is sort of a well understood from all these like quaternary fauna. On the other hand, we don't have too much that is older. We have like some deposits in Western Cuba, which are Jurassic, and people have been found pliosaurs, pterosaurs, ichthyosaurs, and some of them have been described so far. Some fossils from the Miocene also, but not too much from the Cretaceous. Next one. Okay, as you probably know, Cuba is like the largest island in the Caribbean. It's situated between North and South America, east of Central America. But during the late Cretaceous, so like Cuba and the Caribbean weren't exactly in the place that they're nowadays. As you can see in this paleogeographical reconstruction, Cuba and the rest of the Caribbean was part of a volcanic arc of islands that was situated near what is Central America nowadays. Okay, and now you can start thinking like, well, it had an interesting positions because that was the area connecting between the Tethys and then the Pacific. Then you should have like some fauna that was converging in that area. But it goes beyond that. Next one. In the late Cretaceous, Cuba was actually near the Pacific. The Caribbean plate started forming in the Pacific at the end of the Jurassic, and it started moving on eastwards through the Cretaceous. And by the late Cretaceous, about 70 million years ago, it's like the plate, sorry, I cannot see super well. The margin contact between the Caribbean plate and the Atlantic, that was the Proto-Caribbean there, was forming these archaeovolcanic islands. Part of those terrains are currently found in the Greater Antilles and also in part of the Lesser Antilles in the Caribbean. But more interestingly, at the late Cretaceous, there was an exchange of fauna and flora between North America and South America. You have some dinosaurs and marsupials going from North America into South America and showing up for the first time in the late Cretaceous and early Paleocene. You have land snails, and you have also from South America, for example, titanosaurs coming into North America. And the same is known to happen for plants. Now, some of the people working in this group have the hypothesis that it went through the Caribbean, through the early Caribbean islands was that migration, sort of like stepping stones. And those hypotheses have been debated for a long time, but we have too much resolution. It's like we know that the islands existed, or at least based on geological evidence, people have said that there were islands, but no one have really found the fossils of the animals and plants that were living there, okay? For example, in 75, Rosen, who was a biogeography, said that part of the Caribbean fauna that live nowadays there got into the islands in the late Cretaceous or early Paleocene. It's like North America or South America. Well, the problem with some of these hypotheses is that many of the elements that are living nowadays in the Caribbean are too young. It's like they only separated from the relative in the continent a couple of million years ago. Doesn't go back to the Cretaceous. At the same time, it's like at the KT boundary, the Caribbean probably suffered some major habitat destructions because it was quite close to the impact area. And some of the geological studies have said that there were no permanent islands in the Caribbean until the late Eocene. However, there are some fauna and plants, from the Caribbean, like the Solenodon, which is like one of the few venomous mammals in the world, which lives in Hispaniola and Cuba. And this lizard that is known as Cretaceous that separate from the sister taxa around 75 million years ago. I have been isolated on the islands for that time. Okay, next one. Well, again, test some of these hypotheses, we really need to go and find the fossils, you know, where there were permanent islands, where there was some interchange through the islands, we need to go and find the fossils. And for a long time, people have been collecting fossils in Cuba in cave. And in cave, you're not going to find fossils of this age. You need to go outside of the darkness and look for outcrops. And two very important collectors who live in central Cuba have been fundamental for many of the fossils that have been found there. So like most of them have been collected by these two materials. And they are in central Cuba in a province called Cienfuegos, near the town of Rodas. And as you can see in the geologic map, it's sort of like a complex geologic region. You have like several formations that are from the late Cretaceous, but you also have some exposures of like Eocene rocks and even some from the Neogene. And they have been studying three main localities called Presa de Mují, Aguaditas, and Puente Broterillo. In each one of them, we found sort of like a different flora and fauna with some overlapping elements. Throughout this area, you can find mainly marine deposits, but there are also some fluvial deposits for where the most interesting fossils are coming from. Okay. As you can imagine, since like the Caribbean was sort of like in a seaway, you're gonna find a lot of invertebrates, including some crabs. And this has been some of the most recently described one, all of them corresponding to new species from Cuba. Many of these taxons are actually related with other fossils known from Mexico, from the US, and from Europe. Next one. And at the same time, we have been finding fossil sharks. The first fossil shark described from Cuba was, the first fossil shark from the Cretaceous described from Cuba was in 2005. And it was the Coros cyclodontis. And this was the only known vertebrate from the late Cretaceous in Cuba, and was the second known vertebrate from the entire Caribbean. So just imagine how many things are waiting to be discovered there. And with some of the explorations that Carlos and Alberto, who are the people down in the field every day, they have come across like very interesting fossils, including some sharks like Ceratorana serrata, which was like recently published in a paper this year, and another ones that haven't been published yet, and they're currently under study. Many of these species have like close relative also in the US in similar marine environments, and actually Ceratorana probably have a global distribution. Among some of the more interesting fossils, there is like a tooth from a mosasaur. It's also like the first mosasaur known from the Caribbean, and of course from Cuba. That specimen is also currently under study and come from one of the limestone deposits in this region. We also find several rudists, some of them with mark. We found fossils of like more crabs that haven't been described. We found cephalopods. Invertebrates are the most common fossils in this area. And sadly, there is basically no one studying there. It's like they're completely under study, but they're very, very, very common in the region. However, it's like I have a bias towards vertebrae because I work with them. And I was very excited when we found these first fossils. And these are actually fossils of pterosaurs. And they are like, again, the first pterosaurs from the Caribbean, from the late Cretaceous. Although they're quite fragmentary, we only have found, at the moment of these illustrations, only some shaft. We know that there are pterosaurs based on the histology. We send the specimens to a laboratory down in Argentina, and they prepare thin sections, and they were able to assign them confidently to pterosaurs based on like specific traits that pterosaurs have as specialization to flight. More recently, we also found a fragment, a distal fragment of a phalange. We hope to find more complete elements from these species. And this is like one of the first evidence that are illustrating that, well, yes, there probably were actually islands, and then there were animals inhabiting those islands, you know?
Sorry, needed to unmute myself. So those were some of the beginning fossils that could lead us into a more terrestrial environment. The next couple of things are the plant fossils. The first are these couple of fossil woods that we have here. They were found from the Aguaditas locality. If you notice the overall structure in here for the tracheids, they are lacking vessel elements, and the overall orientation suggests that they are gymnospermic in nature. However, not enough other characteristics are in here for us to say more about them. But so fossil wood is known to be drafting material throughout the sea, so it's not very specifically something that would isolate us on land, but at the very least, it's something that would suggest that there could have been something here with wood in it. And that's exciting because, as we know, wood is more indicative of something that is closer to the land than other things. We continued going with that, and again, another something that goes adrift with leaf shoots. So these are essentially gymnosperm again, but a little bit more specific with Cretaceous shoots. You can see that these things have this scale arrangement around, so they're not exactly quite like needles as found in other gymnosperms. And they're kind of arranged in a spiral, but you would also notice that they bifurcate. And all these characteristics suggest Cretaceous. Again, we can't go any further in the identification, but it suggests at least that wherever this was, it was close enough to the land that we would be accumulating some amount of, well, leafy material. And those are good signs. And then one of the best signs for all of this is that there's a really high amount of fossil fruits found here. Now, all of these are this ovoid or elliptical shaped fruits. They are all being held, they have the scarring in it with the chalazo, and the chalaza corresponds highly with this cupule thing that holds it down here. So this right here is sort of like a little cup where the fruit is held. And on the other hand, we have an identifiable dimple-like thing that is where the hilum and micropyle of the fruit would be. And these characteristics are generally loraceous in where they would fall, but there's not a lot of details in here for us to be that confident with this identification. However, the main thing is that this type of fruit, as it is, if it is loraceous, is not one that is super highly associated with being the type of fruit that falls in the middle of the ocean and travels around like a sort of coconut. So this at least is somewhat suggestive that there was something producing it, especially with the high quantity of fruits that we have. Actually, for the show and tell, I probably should have shown those fossils because I do have them right next to me, and we have a lot of these fruits. So just by the quantity of it, it's unlikely that they just arrived there from nowhere being clumped up like that. And it is a good type of characteristic for some terrestrial material. There is one more fossil that Lazaro found recently, or that Lazaro was given to identify that and found recently, that he wants to mention, as it is another one of those good things towards the terrestrial island biome hypotheses. So floor back to him for a second.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, I just got some of the photos that you can see on the left. Basically, the one that is just like above the scale. And my colleague from Cuba sent it to me, and he says, like, what do you think about it? I found in one of the localities. And I look at it, and I look at specimens very similar to the one that you can see on the left that I have in my office. And I was like, well, you just found a Caracolus that is probably from the Quaternary. Don't worry. And he's like, no, I'm sure that comes from the Cretaceous bed. And he sent me photos of more specimens. And indeed, yeah, they come from the Cretaceous bed. And these are like land snails. They're pulmonate snails. It seems to be closely related with Caracolus. And Caracolus is a genus that is like currently extant in Cuba and some of the islands in the Caribbean. Also, this group of snails originated in North America. and probably came to the Caribbean in the Cretaceous. And this would be like sort of like the first evidence of like land snails from the Cretaceous to the present in the Caribbean, surviving the KP boundaries, surviving sea level changes, and still being around. And we're very excited about these findings because there are multiples of them, which again support the idea that yes, there were permanent islands with large forests, probably we know that there were pterosaurs around, and yeah, we're very excited about these findings. And something that also Julian found with the plants is that some of the seeds seems to be closely related with a genus that is known from South America nowadays. However, molecular studies have shown that the sister group to that genus is in North America. And the separation between the two of them occurred in the late Cretaceous. And in the paper where they talk about it, they have the hypothesis that it's like the ancestors like crossed through the ancient Caribbean into North America in the late Cretaceous. And conveniently enough, we're finding the fossils of that same group in the Caribbean, which is very exciting. Next one.
So with this material, we really want to associate it. It's with the Lauraceous material properly, but in order to do that, we need more material. So that's something that Lazaro and I have been talking about and trying to figure out how we can make a proposal for it. But we would need more details in the pericarp and other things, and we would hopefully find extra fossils that would support this idea, and that hopefully has you guys a little bit excited about this exchange, because it's really interesting to find these things and be able to see the process of nature migrating through the fossil record. So it's pretty cool. Outside of that, I will simply leave off with the idea that we will hopefully one day continue this. If you guys are ever interested in that, we will grab any volunteers that we can, but we know right now it's kind of tenuous to travel with everything, especially into another country. So we understand.
Yeah. I would like to add that, of course, working in the tropics is hard because there are not too many outcrops. It's like most of the places are covered by forests. If you're lucky enough that you find a rock cut or a creek, go and explore it as much as you can, because in a few years, it's going to be a road or it's going to be covered again. And we have been working intensively, and we expect to collect more fossils. Of course, now we want to expand and not just do like prospecting. We want to excavate in some of the sites. We probably want to look for microfossils because if there were some small mammals, probably you're going to find like isolated teeth. Yeah, we're expecting probably to find like higher diversity than what we have now. And this has been probably in the last 3 years. Much more can be done with like more intensive field work. Yeah.
So with that, we'll leave you off with some acknowledgements of some of the colleagues that have helped a lot with this project, because honestly, they are the ones carrying this project through in more ways than one. And just to give citation to the geologic reconstruction for the time, since some of the images are made from the images there, we put the citation for the Pinante 2006 paper. If you guys would allow me, I did dig up the box where I have all the fossils. I keep it very nicely in a very safe place next to me because it's the only place that I trust to be safe. We haven't put them in the collections yet, simply because the university is giving us issues with how they should process this material because of where it comes from, and how there's very little, like, the work is being officially done, but because of the issues with government, it's not always easy for them to say, oh yes, we accept that as a proper collector type thing. Instead they're being like, what do? We don't know what to do with it. So for now, I'm holding on to that part of the material. Lazaro has some of the material for that he has himself too. But do we have time to show that? Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing now. And
Also, if you have any question, feel free to ask.
oh yes, I should have left time for questions before I did the show and tell. So, go ahead.
Folks, go ahead with questions if you have them for the guys, and then they're going to do a little show and tell.
I have a question. So those shark teeth that I showed you that I got in New Zealand sound like they're very similar environment, because you said that there were oysters and mosasaurs that were also in that same vicinity. And when I was in New Jersey, they also had oysters, which I found some oysters, and mosasaur teeth were also available there. Is that just a common Cretaceous? Because it was the same time period, Cretaceous in New Jersey as well. Is it just the same? Is that a common ecosystem, tropical sharks, mosasaurs, oysters, things like that living in the same area?
I wouldn't be sure if it's like tropical exactly, but I would say, yeah, in many areas you can find like associated, like the world combine very similar ecosystems. It's like sharks and mosasaurs, mainly if you have probably some of the smaller body-sized mosasaurs. And if they are closer to oysters, I mean that it's probably not too deep marine environment, so like shallow. And then you're gonna have like these like medium-sized small species of sharks, probably same with the mosasaurs. Yeah, probably were apex predators in those kind of environments around there. Yeah. Thank
you.
Welcome.
Tell me what size your specimens you were showing us of the gastropods or snails were? How big?
They're probably about this size. Yeah, probably 3 centimeters. Yeah.
Oh, pretty good size then, actually.
Yep. Yeah.
One thing that I personally always jump to, just because one of my first experiences with sharks were finding out that a lot of sharks have nurseries. And whenever I think of mosasaurs, I also think of nurseries. So whenever I hear shallow marine Cretaceous, I always wonder, I wonder if that serves as a sort of nursery for those animals, because shallow marine would probably serve as a good spot for all of them, including giants like the megalodon. They did a shallow.
That was Bruce's former student.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, shallow marine usually have like this carbonate platform around the islands where you have a lot of light, a lot of like energy, and you have like fishes and all kind of things, you know, and that attract a lot of predators usually in that kind of environments. Similar, some of those environments, at least in Cuba, were similar to like coral reefs now today.
Harold Haynes here. I've been to Cuba, although I'm a historian. And I would be interested in, it depends on the period, in terms of how difficult it is to get into Cuba, to collect restrictions and equipment that you can bring in, and so on and so on. But tell us more about your collecting experience in Cuba itself. I'm really quite interested in that.
Thank you for asking. Well, I will say that I don't have too much problem. I grew up in Cuba. That means as a Cuban, it was very easy. And I even have my own collection. I grew up like collecting fossils from quarries, like from Quaternary deposits, from Miocene deposits. And large part of the research that have been done in Cuba actually was done by people who started as amateurs, and they started building their own collections. And that was very much promoted by the Spelunking Society. And that is why there's so many known fossils from the Quaternary and from cave deposits. It's like the Cuba have a very strong Spelunking Society with groups basically in each one of the provinces. And they were exploring deposits. And as they were finding, you know, people were building their own collections, and some of them started doing research and start publishing them. For foreigners, it's usually a little bit more complicated to go to some of the localities. I have been, when I was down in Montana as an undergrad student, we had a class about natural history of Cuba, and we spent around 10 days down in Cuba. And we went to some of the localities and we didn't have any trouble. But usually it's necessary to get some kind of like permits. And when there are foreigners, it's like the government is more concerned about like where people going and where people are doing sometimes. But I know that people usually go down there. And I think some of the people that go to Cuba to collect fossils are usually going to the north part of Matanzas province in Havana, looking for megalodon teeth, because they are quite common in that area.
Wow.
Yeah. Hope that was useful.
It's quite interesting because I've been to Cuba and I'm familiar with some of the difficulties of collecting there. That's all.
Yeah. How was your experience? Yeah.
Oh, I was invited as part of an international group from Europe and North America to spend 2 weeks in Cuba, basically studying the mass communication system in Cuba.
Oh, that's great.
Very different.
Yeah. Do you find some interesting fossils?
No.
Yeah. Sometimes it's like in every place, you need to know like where to go to collect the specimens and where they are. But I can guarantee you, if you go to any cave in Cuba, at least you're going to find a few fossils. They're very, very common in caves. Yeah.
Great question, Harold. Thank you for asking that. Other questions? Can you guys show us some of your specimens then?
Okay, I'll go ahead and start it. So this is one of the ones pictured. As you can see, there's like a little dimple. That's more or less where we suppose that the top is. To the other side, you have a much more obvious indentation in there, much prominent. And the reason why we have found this orientation to hold up true is because this is one of the few. Actually, no, it's not this one. But when you have this thing, this is the copule. And, well, we have this little guy. You can see the chelazos thing there, high-low thing there, smaller one on the top. And give me a second while I make it fit, because I need to make sure that it's in the proper orientation. Ta-da! It fits.
Yeah.
So it's really cool whenever you're able to find such a complete fossil like that. We're still missing part of the skin material that would be pericarp, and that could give us more details in there. Sadly, that's the case for most of them. It's just it's hard to collect these things, trying to find them and not seeing what they are until you have removed some of the dirt. But part of the dirt is sometimes more closer to the skin in here. Here's one of the bigger ones. I am going to put ruler for scale.
Okay.
Actually, put it in the inches. It's easier to read. And again, you can sort of see that it had this rather big attachment scar down here, where we suppose the chelase is. While the top, it has a smaller thing in it to the dimple. But there are tons of these. I haven't taken them all out because it takes me a while to unwrap them and keep making sure that any things that have fallen off are still with it. But it's very, very common overall, just how many there are. So it's a good sign that they just didn't arrive them randomly. And it doesn't seem like they were attached to anything, so they wouldn't be like clumping up because they were coming from a branch or anything. So we would find probably more copules if that was the case. So it's a good sign that this thing was very much something giving a lot of fruits, and I mean a lot, just to find so many. So it's a pretty cool little site to have with so many big fruits in it. If you guys want to take a look at any of them again, I can show them to you guys in more detail. I just kind of wanted to show the main characteristics there like that. I don't know if, I think there you might be able to see them. And then on the other side, finding an angle that shows these things is kind of difficult.
So these were Cretaceous, but
Yes.
do we know if they were from a flowering plant, like a palm, or what?
So at first we did think that they might have been from palms because of the location, but we didn't find any characteristics that would suggest that. And the fact that the two ends had such prominent scarring is not always as common. And when Dr. Manchester saw the two sides of it like that, one of the things that came to his mind was Lauraceae, which is why we went that way. And we found eventually this thing with the copule that really makes it much more closer to that, because that type of copule is common within quite a couple of the more tropical Lauraceae plant fossils.
And
Not
just
just
as a like a recap, not a recap, but to elaborate on that. So Lauraceae, that's the laurel family, and in terms of fruit like that might be more familiar, avocados are a member of that family. So Persea is the genus for avocados, and so we're looking at some sort of avocado relative.
Very large.
Also why you would find such a big seed system to it. Just they had, a lot of them had larger seeds to them.
Thank you.
California Bay or Oregon Myrtle, depending on which side of the border you're on, is also the same family, but a different fruit. So.
Thank you.
Julian,
Yes.
are those fruits, are those casts, or do they have internal structure?
They appear to be only casts. We haven't been able to find any internal structure, and the CT scans didn't find anything internal. So it appears that they're just cast system. So I hope that you guys enjoyed our little collective thoughts on the Cuban material that has been brought over. It's pretty cool, and we hope that we continue to find more at some point. It'd be cool.
It was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Lazaro, did you have some fossils to show? They're all boxed away.
Let me see it. What I don't have like too many things from Cuba. I have them in my office. You can bring some today.
Yeah, making them work too hard.
That's awesome.
So while we're waiting on Julian, or you're Julian, while we're waiting on Lazaro, Julian, what's your time frame for what's next with your career, and what do you hope to do?
I myself, this is just completed second year, which was kind of a lost year. I'm not sure I accomplished anything this entire year, which means, I mean, I was writing and I was doing things, but at the same time, I just feel like it feels like a very surreal year. In the future, I'm not sure. I do want to continue working with fossil materials and just collecting, and but I also do like a lot of teaching things, so I hopefully will find a job that can do both of those things to some degree together. Yeah.
Yeah, I found a few fossils. They are not necessarily from the Cretaceous of Cuba. There's some of them are from Cuba, and they're from my collection. I don't know how much you can see here.
What?
Oh,
Yeah, this is a dentary baby sloth from Cuba. You can see. Yeah. This is from like a Pleistocene, Holocene deposit near my hometown, where you used to go biking almost every weekend and collecting fossils there. These are from an extinct owl.
Is that the same owl that was on your title slide, your cover slide?
No. Sadly,
Okay.
I haven't that one, but I have them in my office. Yeah, no, that one on Megalonyx put this one to shame. This is like is a barn owl. Like this is like title Noelle, and it's just like a normal barn owl but in steroid. The other one was like a giant one. It was probably around like 3 feet tall.
whoa.
Like very big. This is also another extinct bird that is called Nesotrochis. It's a Tarsometatarsas, and it was considered to be a rare until recently, but there was a study that came actually out of the museum looking at DNA from one of the extinct species, but on Hispaniola, and they actually found that they are closely related to a group of birds from Africa, and nothing to the New World. It's like very puzzling. Yeah, these are like some tiny Korean shrews. These are like Mesophontes. And they're close related with Solinodon, who was like the other one in the presentation that I told you that was venomous. Yeah, these are the closer groups. It's like this genus is completely extinct nowadays. But it used to be in Cuba, in the Cayman Islands, in Hispaniola, and Puerto Rico. And it seems that they were really tasty, at least for the owls, because you can find them by thousands in some of those deposits.
What's the age on that?
These are Pleistocene, Holocene. We date some of them actually to just 600 years ago. Yeah. This skull of a rodent. They're commonly known in the Caribbean as hutias. And that is actually why I'm working for my dissertation. They used to be quite diverse. Now most species are extinct. Of course, like humans arrived to the islands and they disappeared. You know, they ate it and destroyed the habitats, and the classic history of humans on islands, let's say. But yeah, they were quite diverse and quite interesting group. This one is from Hispaniola, and it was very common. It's very commonly found in Alp deposits, but also Amerindians really like it. And among like 11 species of rodents that were in Hispaniola, this is the one most often found in archaeological sites. And it seems that they like it so much that among all the other species, they select this one and they brought it from Hispaniola to Mona Island, to Puerto Rico, and to the Virgin Islands, and introduced it populations that were only controlled by humans. Yeah. And a little bit older, we're working in, these are probably late Pliocene. These are like some steam plates. Yeah. And these are some of the fossils I have here today.
Some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much, Lazaro, for sharing that. Both Julian
of
and
course.
the great display specimens you guys find important. It's cool.
Thank you.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions for the guys or?
Kind of late there.
Okay. Yeah, we want to make sure you guys get a chance to have an evening before it's nighttime. Probably 11 o'clock there already. So
Yeah.
thank you guys for taking the time. This was really enjoyable. I presume we can, we recorded this, we posted on our website. That's okay with you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Nice presentation. We really enjoyed it.
Thanks.
It was fun.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a safe
Good
flight
job.
back
Way to go,
to,
guys.
Thank you.
Virginia.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really fun to do these kind of things, and yeah, I'm glad you invited us, and we have the chance of like sharing a little bit of what we're doing. Yeah, and hopefully maybe one of you will come to Cuba to look for fossils and to some of the islands in the Caribbean.
We'll sequester you yet.
I'll have to time it when you're there so you can take us around to the good spots.
For sure.